Jose Mourinho and Manchester United always sounded like an obvious match. Relentless winning mentality runs deep in the blood of both the club and the Portuguese tactician, and this appointment back in May 2016 seemed almost guaranteed to put Manchester United back at the summit of English football. But Mourinho wasn't the only marquee appointment that summer, with United bringing in Paul Pogba, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Eric Bailly and Henrik Mkhitaryan. It felt as though Mourinho was surrounding himself with allies in the dressing room and ensuring that he had enough players on his side if he needed that siege mentality to come to fruition. Mourinho's first season saw mixed fortunes. United actually regressed in terms of their league position, finishing 6th, down from the 5th under Louis van Gaal. But that could largely be put down to the fact that Mourinho utilised his pragmatic expertise to guide United through a successful Europa League campaign, ultimately completing the club's trophy collection and securing Champions League football. At the time, it felt as though this was a real watershed moment for the club. Mourinho had put United back at the top table of European football, as well as helping to re-establish a trophy-winning culture within the squad. It felt like that final victory over Ajax in Stockholm was supposed to be the catalyst for Mourinho to turn his Manchester United reign into something special. This season was about reversing the mistakes made by previous managers, and next season was about kicking on. And it all started so well. United got off to an absolute flyer in 17-18, scoring 10 goals and conceding 0 in their opening 3 games. Little did we know at the time that Manchester City were embarking on what would become a record-breaking season and would hold top spot from matchday 6 until eventually being crowned champions. United ultimately finished a distant second, with Mourinho securing the club's best league finish since Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement, but that doesn't tell the full story. 17-18 was a turbulent season for Manchester United, and one that saw them fail to deliver on the promise of early season form. It became clear by December that United simply weren't going to be able to keep pace with Manchester City, with Mourinho's men taking just 12 of the 21 points available to them and losing to City at home in the process. One player who particularly struggled during this period was Henrik Mkhitaryan, who hadn't started for United since mid-November. The Armenian tended to be heavily involved in everything good that Manchester United had done during his time at Old Trafford, but found himself out of favour and ultimately moved to Arsenal in January, with Alexis Sanchez going the other way. You could make a strong argument that this was ultimately the beginning of the end for Jose Mourinho. Mkhitaryan became the first of many key players that Mourinho would fall out with, and United struggled to replace his creativity on the pitch. Alexis Sanchez was deployed almost exclusively on the left wing, heavily limiting playing time for Anthony Martial, who would pick up United's Player of the Month for January. There was also a feeling of discontentment that hung over United for the rest of the league season. The momentum of Martial and Rashford ended, the creativity of Mkhitaryan gone. Whilst the 81 points that United ultimately amassed is respectable, it became increasingly clear that there were major underlying problems with Mourinho at United. Those underlying tensions were laid bare on the 13th of March when United limped out of the Champions League after a lifeless performance over 2 legs against Sevilla. With defeat coming just a matter of days after United had handsomely beaten Liverpool at Old Trafford, it felt like one false dawn too many for a lot of the United support. With United almost certain to wrap up a Champions League spot, but even more certain to put no real pressure on City for the title, that night in mid-March felt like it was the end of the season, but it was the end of the relationship between Jose Mourinho and Paul Pogba. Left out of both games, rumours of a massive row behind the scenes, their relationship would never be the same. Jose did little to endear himself to the supporters in the aftermath of the Champions League exit either. His press conference riled United fans and arguably drove the first wedge between manager and the club support. As always, the summer transfer window brought a sense of optimism and scepticism in equal measures. Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, Toby Alderweireld, Gareth Bale and Alex Sandro were frequently mentioned. After finishing a mammoth 19 points off top spot, it felt like a big summer was needed, especially with the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea strengthening significantly and intelligently. If Mourinho was going to have any real chance of challenging in 18-19, he needed to bring in players that were ready to rock from the off. As we now know, Mourinho wasn't backed in the summer, with the likes of Everton and even Leicester outspending the so-called biggest club in the world. Again, Jose didn't help matters. His attitude could have left a better feeling to what transpired in the summer. He reluctantly took some academy stars on tour, but then publicly stated that they aren't good enough. I get the impression that Jose knew before the end of the World Cup he wasn't getting the players that he needed, and that probably contributed to his mood. But I think his attitude could have helped matters. It didn't take long to see why Mourinho wanted heavy investment in the squad, with West Ham and Brighton both putting free past David De Gea early on in the season. In his opening games, it became quite clear what Jose Mourinho could achieve with this squad is limited. With the Juventus visit to Old Trafford, we were shown just how far from Europe's elite Manchester United had fallen. Jose is ultimately not a coach, and as such he looks out of place without ready-made quality players that he's used to having at his disposal. United looked void of identity and confidence before the season even really got going. Perhaps even more important than the influx of quality though, Mourinho needed to bring in allies in the dressing room over the summer. United's poor defensive record put a strain on his relationship with Eric Bailly, whilst Paul Pogba's flirting with Barcelona was largely due to his relationship with Jose. With Ibrahimovic having moved on, it seems that only Nemanja Matic and Romelu Lukaku are the players devoted to Mourinho, which means that the pressure of poor performances is intensified. When Jose Mourinho manages your football team, there are compromises that you have to make. You have to accept that you're not going to see the most exhilarating brand of football. You have to accept that minutes for youth players are limited. And you have to accept that you'll likely have to start from scratch when he bounces in 3 years' time. You have to accept these things because Mourinho always brings titles when he's given what he needs. At Manchester United though, we've hired him and asked him to be someone else. You can't work with Mourinho like that. It's his way or it's the highway. Mourinho has compromised a number of relationships with players and possibly staff. He's compromised his relationship with the fans, and it looks like he's compromised his relationship with the board. Jose Mourinho couldn't find enough allies to fight this war with him, and United's inconsistency will ultimately mean that he needs replacing in this role. Some good wins have bought him time, but the meter is definitely running. Mourinho isn't the only thing that's wrong at Manchester United, but he is a massive part of the problem of what's wrong at Manchester United. Sacking Jose Mourinho might change the mood. Sacking Jose Mourinho might lift this squad. Sacking Jose Mourinho might give us a chance. It's time to go.